in a global television network.
ISIS leader killed in a U.S. counter-terrorism operation in Syria. It was contagious, ECOWAS chairman says of Mali coup as West African leaders meet over regional political crisis. And the AU says COVID-19 and climate change are worsening Africa's hunger crisis. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. I will bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Hannah Vivier with the day's business headlines. Hannah.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. Let's take a look at what's coming up in Africa Live business. World food prices climb closer towards record high as inflation runs rampant across the globe. And South African business activity rebounded in January as COVID-19 cases receded. We'll have more details on those stories and more in business, but for now, let's take a look at what's happening around the world with Beatrice.
Hannah, thank you. U.S. President Joe Biden says the leader of ISIS has been killed during a raid in Syria. The operation took place in the northwestern province of Idlib. Biden said Abu Ibrahim al-Hashemi al-Qurayshi blew himself as U.S. forces closed in on him. Al-Qurayshi took over as head of the militant group in 2019, just days after his predecessor died during a U.S. raid. First responders reported 13 people dead, including 6 children and 4 women.
Knowing that this terrorist had chosen to surround himself with families, including children, we made a choice to pursue a special forces raid at a much greater risk than to our own people, rather than targeting him with an airstrike. We made this choice to minimize civilian casualties. Our team is still compiling the report, but we do know that as our troops approach to capture the terrorist, in a final act of desperate cowardness, he, with no regard to the lives of his own family or others in the building, he chose to blow himself up, not just to the vest, but to blow up that 3rd floor, rather than face justice for the crimes he has committed, taking several members of his family with him, just as his predecessor did.
Well, several witnesses from a nearby refugee camp say they heard the gunfire from the raid.
At
around 1:30 a.m., we were awakened by the sounds of helicopters. It's been a long time since we have had this kind of sounds. The residents of the camp were very scared because these sounds remind us of the times before our displacement, during which the Assad regime used aircrafts and helicopters and barrel bombs. So the residents of the camp stayed awake because they didn't know that this raid was by the coalition forces, which don't use barrel bombs.
For more than 2.5 hours and 2 hours and 45 minutes, the planes were in the air and we heard the sound of machine guns and airstrikes from helicopters, and you can see now how it is. There were more than 6 children. 2 women and 2 men were martyred in this raid and operation.
Well, let's now bring in John Terrett in New York and Zara Aldezi in Damascus. Let's begin with you, John, in New York. What more do we know so far about this operation?
Well, Beatrice, this is being reported here in the United States as absolutely huge, a great success for U.S. Special Forces. It is, after all, the second ISIS leader that they have taken out in the last 3 years. Now, according to the administration in Washington, D.C., at midnight local time, high up on the Syrian border with Turkey, there was an attack on the home or the headquarters of the current ISIS leader Abu Ibrahim al-Hashemi al-Qurayshi. According to President Biden, who gave a news conference in the White House within the last couple of hours, there were no U.S. casualties. A helicopter was lost. There was a firefight that lasted some 2 hours. And there are reports from local media of 13 bodies, including children, being seen nearby to the home where al-Qurayshi was. Now, what is significant about this, if it is true, and I hope we'll be able to come on to whether it's true or not in just a moment. What is significant about this is that al-Qurayshi was a ghost. You never saw him. He never used social media. He didn't use email. He never used a telephone, landline or cell. So tracking him down was always very, very difficult. And that's why here it's being reported as a great success for US special operations. And it follows a huge prison break in the Syrian town of Hasakah only last week, which is seen by military experts as ISIS flexing its muscles once again, a resurgence from ISIS, which for the last couple of years, as you know, after it was defeated effectively, has been holed up essentially in the desert, in a small desert region in the middle of Syria. And it may be, according to military experts, that because of that prison break and because of the assumed resurgence of ISIS, that therefore al-Qurayshi was more active, maybe using a cell phone, maybe using a telephone, maybe using email than he would otherwise have been, and it may be that that is how they were able to track him down. Either way, this is a very similar operation to the 2019 raid, which actually took place very nearby, in which the previous ISIS leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, was also killed. Beatrice?
Right. And Zara, what are you hearing though on the ground?
According to the local sources in Adler,
Dan?
4 helicopters carried out an airdrop on the village of Atama near Syria-Turkey border. According to the locals, the U.S. military requested residents of a house to leave, but then series of clashes took place there, and the sources say that in that moment, the leader, the ISIL leader, escaped from them, but then the U.S. airstrikes targeted 2 houses, killing 13 people, including 6 children and 4 civilians. According also to the rebel media platforms, they also confirmed that all the bodies they have found in the location that were civilians, and no body of the targeted terrorists was found there. The U.S. targeted and announced killing a leader of the ISIL, his name is Omar Kardas, who's from Turkish origin. It's very important also to indicate that the area of or the town of Atama includes refugee camps for thousands of the Syrians who are internally displaced and living in camps under observation and of the international organizations.
Right. John, you know, those reports of casualties there are reports that 13 civilians were killed in that operation. Tell us more about this and how Washington is responding to these concerns.
Well, this is what I meant just now by waiting to see if it's actually true. It's very important to understand that the final report on this raid is still being written, and it's important to understand that we do not at this stage understand exactly what happened. But according to President Biden, in the White House within the last 2 hours, there were no US casualties, though apparently they lost a helicopter. And you're quite right, there are reports of 12, 13 bodies, including children, around the compound where Abu Ibrahim al-Qurayshi was found dead. Now, according to President Biden, this was a U.S. special operation event. It was not an air raid. I believe there were aircraft or drones involved. We'll have to wait and see for all the details, but it was certainly led by U.S. special operations. And President Biden says that Abu Ibrahim al-Qurayshi, just like his predecessor al-Baghdadi in 2019, chose to blow himself up. So there was apparently a 2-hour firefight, and in the course of that firefight, this man chose to blow himself up, according to the president, not just by detonating his vest, but by detonating the whole of the 3rd floor and taking out other people, including, according to the president, members of his family. Now, this is very important to understand. Critics will argue, therefore, that this raid was not a success because there were apparently so many civilian casualties. And the reason this is important, if you cast your mind back to Afghanistan last year, when the US was pulling out of the airport, there was a US strike on a vehicle which the US believed contained terrorists heading to blow up targets at the airport. And it turned out not to be true. It turned out to be a vehicle full of civilians, including a very high-profile NGO worker. And so for that reason, already the United States is facing a lot of criticism, and it's going to take a while before all that happened today is clear. But two things are certain. Number one, whoever takes this is a serious blow to ISIS because they've lost their leader, so they're going to have to replace their leader now, and whoever that is going to have a very difficult task doing whatever this previous leader was trying to achieve in terms of resurgence of the organization. And the second thing to take away, President Biden said it in the White House. He said, if you're an enemy of the United States or a terrorist, we're coming for you wherever you are. Beatrice?
All right, John Terra joining us there from New York, and Zara joining us there from Damascus. To you both, thank you. Now, West African leaders have been holding a key summit in Ghana's capital, Accra. The meeting aims to assess the outcome of two missions to Burkina Faso following a coup there in January. Military chiefs from ECOWAS flew to Ouagadougou on Saturday and Monday for talks with the junta. Delegates say the junta seemed very open to their suggestions and proposals made. The junta says it has restored the constitution in Burkina Faso, and on Wednesday it lifted a nationwide curfew with some restrictions on nightlife. The region has faced a series of coups or attempted seizure of power, starting with the Mali coup in 2021.
The resurgence of coups d'etats in our region is a matter of grave concern. This evolution challenges the democratic way of life we have chosen. We need to stand firm to protect democracy and freedom in our region.
Well, let's cross over to Nabil Ahmed Rufai. He's joining us now from the Ghanaian capital, Accra. Nabil, what's the latest from that meeting?
Well, Beatrice, the meeting ended a couple of hours ago, but we are yet to receive a communique from the communications department of the ECOWAS. But what we are picking is that ECOWAS has decided not to impose any further sanction on Burkina Faso, aside the suspension that it's giving the country from the regional bloc. For now, we are told that ECOWAS says it appears it's making some headway with Burkina Faso, the military junta, and that there are plans to restore the country to constitutional rule, and they would want to give the military junta and the other army leaders some time to prepare themselves to hold elections. So no further sanction has been imposed on Burkina Faso as yet. But aside that, the leaders also discussed the situation in Mali and Guinea-Bissau, and they are saying they've not made any headway with both countries, and then those sanctions already imposed on them, the economic sanctions, still hold at the moment, and until they see a clear timeline on when they will hold elections to return the country to a civilian government, that's when the sanctions will be lifted. So basically, that's what the meeting concluded on today. Beatrice.
All right, Nabil Ahmed Rufai in Accra. And turning to the DRC, the country's special representative and the head of the AU liaison office discussed the tragic militant attack on an IDP camp. The assault took place in Ituri province and left at least 70 people dead. Speaking from the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, Josephine Mayuma Kala called on the international community to help bring peace to the country.
La situation est atroce.
It's an atrocious situation. It's a difficult situation. There are a lot of attacks happening in the east of the country. There are a lot of rebel groups. There are a lot of armed groups launching attacks in the eastern DRC. The government of the DRC has for years been fighting them. Our forces are on the ground. UN peacekeeping forces, AU forces, sub-regional forces are all parts of various structures looking to bring peace to the DRC. But the killings and murders continue. This is a time to launch a call to the international community to help bring an end to this war, which persists in my country for many years.
South African authorities have announced that people who test positive for COVID-19 and show no symptoms are no longer required to isolate. The country has also reduced from 10 to 7 the number of days of isolation for those who show symptoms. According to a statement issued by the health authorities, there has been a substantial increase in the number of people with immunity against COVID-19. The announcement coincided with the reopening of schools for this Tuesday and the removal of the 1 meter social distancing rule. Angelo Coppola has the story.
Speaking about the state of readiness of tertiary education institutions to open for the new year, Higher Education Minister Bladen Zamande says the question of vaccine mandates hasn't been resolved yet.
Whilst we are awaiting the finalization of these guidelines in relation to vaccine mandates, and in the management of the academic year, which I intend to prioritize urgently, let's all work together to defeat COVID-19.
There have been questions raised about whether the restrictions at educational institutions should have been kept in place for longer.
We have this two-tier school system where you find in poorer schools you've got overcrowding in the classrooms, and so you are unable to put back distance between pupils. So my proviso to the lifting of these regulations is that schools should still try to adhere to COVID regulations such as mask wearing and hand cleansing and other non-pharmaceutical precautions.
On a broader level, people have mixed feelings about the relaxation of those restrictions.
I don't think government should have stopped the curfew completely. They should have still kept some processes in place. I don't feel safe anymore because the crime have increased in our area.
Others are excited about the prospects of lower restrictions.
It's about time, man. The place must come alive again, man. But the people must wear masks and, observe protocol, everything. Including lifting the curfew, then the people don't walk with masks, they don't keep social distance. You get stubborn people.
There's one more outstanding issue that has to be dealt with, and that's removing the state of disaster legislation, which allowed the authorities to make decisions without the benefit of a parliamentary vote.
We can definitely ask the question as to why do we still need that now. And it also shows a form of weakness, because you maintain this state of disaster when you really can be coming back to some normal form of operation.
Now that those conditions have been relaxed and rotational education is a thing of the past, it just remains to have that state of disaster removed. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. The AU says COVID-19 and climate change are worsening Africa's hunger crisis. Russian President Vladimir Putin will attend the opening ceremony of the Beijing Winter Olympics. China Media Group President and Editor-in-Chief Shen Haixiong asked him about sports and ties with China.
8 years ago in Sochi, now in Beijing, President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin attend Winter Olympics hosted by the other side. CMG President Shen Haixiong noted that 2014 was the first time for a Chinese leader to attend a major international sporting event abroad. Shen quoted President Xi as saying that if our neighbors have a joyous occasion, we certainly should go there to congratulate them. Shen welcomed Putin to Beijing and asked what special role sport plays in relations between the two neighbors, and what results does Putin expect from Russian athletes at the Olympics. Putin said that President Xi and he have known each other for a long time, as good friends and politicians who hold largely the same views on addressing the world's problems. The two leaders maintain close and frequent contact, and that is why he immediately responded to President Xi's invitation to visit China and to join Chinese friends in celebrating this year's main sporting event, the Winter Olympics. And the first ever Winter Games on Chinese soil are taking place during the Chinese New Year in Beijing, the first city in the world to host both the Summer and Winter Games. Putin said he is sure that China's excellent preparations will help the Olympic athletes show their sporting spirit and demonstrate their skills and ability to achieve their goals in fair competition. He said that Russia has been and remains committed to the traditional Olympic values. The country opposes the attempts to politicize sport or use it as a tool of coercion, unfair competition, and discrimination. As for the interaction between Russia and China in sports and physical education, Putin said that it occupies an important place. He said that the Russian and Chinese years of cooperation in physical education and sports in 2022 and 2023, which he announced with President Xi Jinping in December 2021, will certainly be a significant, memorable event for the two countries. The program includes about 500 various popular and youth sports events, as well as educational, sports science, and staff training activities. Activities that prove most successful will continue to be organized on a regular basis. CMG President Shen Haixiong also asked about the significance of the extension of the China-Russia Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation last June, announced by Presidents Xi and Putin. Putin said that the treaty signed more than 20 years ago is a basic policy document that established a legal framework for a long-term consistent development of relations of comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction. He said that is why he and President Xi decided to extend it for another 5 years. Putin said it's a very rich document in terms of ideas it contains. Many of its provisions continue to have great influence in the context of today's rapidly changing international environment. Relations between Russia and China are developing on an equal, non-ideological basis. He said the partnership is sustainable, intrinsically valuable, not affected by the political climate, and not aimed against anyone. The political trust based on this treaty enabled the two countries to establish an effective multi-layer framework of state-to-state cooperation, with meetings of the two leaders playing a key role. China remains firmly at the top of the list of Russia's trade partners. According to preliminary data, last year, even despite the pandemic-related restrictions, bilateral trade reached a historic high, totaling $140 billion. Putin said that China is Russia's strategic partner in the international arena. The approaches of the two countries to most issues on the global agenda concur or are really close. Putin said the concepts laid out in the treaty have allowed the two sides to achieve a never-before-seen high level of partnership and created the conditions enabling them to move forward together. Shen's last question was on behalf of all internet users and winter sports lovers in China. Shen said that when he interviewed Putin in 2018, the Russian president said he was trying to occasionally play hockey, but that appears to be quite an understatement. In a night hockey league match held in May last year, Putin scored a goal just 30 seconds into the game and a total of 8 goals. Shen asked Putin to share the secrets of his prowess with Chinese ice hockey enthusiasts. Putin said he's not in a position to give any advice to people who are passionate about hockey. He will leave this to professional hockey players and coaches. He thinks the most important thing is to do one's favorite sport, no matter what it is, on a routine basis, and to work hard keeping the goal in sight. Over time, mastery will come. Putin said that Russia expects its hockey team to show its best performance at the Beijing Games. He ended by saying there is no doubt that the hockey matches at the Olympics will, as always, be exciting and memorable. Russia is looking forward to seeing some fine play and naturally has confidence in its players and wishes them every success.
And back on the continent, the African Union says there has been a sharp rise in the number of hungry people across Africa. According to the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, over 250 million people on the continent are going hungry, with COVID-19 and climate change only worsening the situation. Here's CGTN's Daniel Moy with that report.
The African Union is set to launch the Year of Nutrition amid worsening levels of hunger and malnutrition. Latest statistics from FAO indicate that 282 million people are hungry with barely anything to eat. The United Nations estimates that food prices in sub-Saharan Africa are now 30 to 40% higher than the rest of the world, taking into account comparative levels of GDP per capita. According to the African Union, food prices have been on the rise hitting the highest percentage points of inflation, standing at 133.7 last December.
The rising food prices pose threats to our purchasing power, but also cause social unrest, as we only too well remember from the 2008 crisis.
It's also feared that progress in achieving several sustainable development goals could be at risk, particularly those touching on poverty and hunger. The situation is said to have worsened due to the impact of climate change on food production.
The way we are addressing problems of peace and security, we should add the nexus, climate change and food security. It's very, very important. Unless we do it, we will not come out of the food insecurity on our continent, and the number of people that are starving, hungry people in Africa will augment, will grow.
There are concerns that many of Africa's staple foods will be severely affected by climate change, leading to reduced yields. For countries in East Africa and the Sahel, droughts are already the new normal. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Environmentalists in Uganda are calling for urgent action to protect wetlands and nature. Latest studies show land covered by wetlands in Uganda has declined from 15% in 1994 to 13% now due to pollution and unsustainable land use in agriculture and construction. Wetlands are areas where water covers the soil, like marshes and swamps. Isabel Nakiria reports.
Shadrach and his friends are making building blocks out of plastic waste. The group is trying to stop the choking of wetlands and water bodies. They organize cleanups to collect plastic waste and are demanding urgent action to end plastic pollution.
When corporations continue to produce without them putting in place systems that reduce or even reveal how much they are producing and redesigning their packaging to end single-use plastic, our cleanups don't mean anything. We shall continue cleaning up after their mess, yet they create it.
Uganda has on several occasions put a ban on single-use plastics, but enforcement has been criticized. Despite commitments by the government to tackle plastic waste, environmentalists say there needs to be more effort to educate communities on the dangers of plastic litter, or else the practice will continue. Uganda says it's taking serious steps to end the degradation of wetlands. Wetlands are important ecosystems that filter waste into water bodies.
Africa-wide, there are over 34 bans on plastic bags. How many countries have taken real steps to achieve this? So we need real working policies and legislative instruments that can be able to achieve and control the use of plastics, the manufacturing of plastics, and make sure that we end single-use plastics.
The country is also drafting new legislation on wetland management and stricter punishments and penalties for those who break rules. The government has issued eviction notices and cancelled over 300 title deeds for those illegally occupying wetlands under existing laws.
The ministry is planning, together with National Environment Management Authority, to recruit, train and retool the Environment Protection Force to cover the whole country and be based in all the districts so that we can reduce the rate of wetlands degradation.
Uganda is part of the global movement, the Clean Seas campaign, and is committed to checking the flow of plastic litter and waste into water bodies and ecosystems like wetlands. Shadrach and his team say until more progress is made, they'll need to pick up the slack. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
Well, let's now go to Hannah Vivier for a look at the latest business news. Hannah.
Thank you so much for that, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in Africa Live Biz. World food prices climb closer towards a record high as inflation runs rampant across the globe. And South African business activity rebounded in January as COVID-19 cases receded.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at the day's business news. The global food prices jumped towards a record high last month, further adding to the surging cost of living for consumers. The United Nations Index of Prices rose 1.1% in January, pushed up by more expensive vegetable oils and dairy products. The gauge is edging closer to 2011's all-time high, and unfavorable weather for crops and the fallout from an energy crisis threaten to keep prices high going forward. Inflation has been running rampant across the globe, and the latest leg higher in the UN's food index could further stretch household budgets. The rise in food prices is particularly bad news for the poorest consumers and nations with the least disposable income. Well, heading over to South Africa, the private sector there, the activity rose slightly in January as the Omicron wave of COVID-19 cases receded, lifting demand and stabilizing new business. And that's according to a survey which was released on Thursday. The IHS Markets Purchasing Managers Index rose to 50.9 in January from 48.4 in December, slightly back above the 50 neutral mark in expansionary territory. The rapid decline in the Omicron wave prompted a surge in business optimism to the highest in just over 7 years, amid greater promise that economic conditions would be less affected by the COVID-19 in 2022. South Africa no longer requires those who test positive for COVID-19 without symptoms to isolate, and has also reduced the isolation period for those with symptoms by 3 days. And that's as the country as it exits its fourth wave of the coronavirus. Well, the African Union has called for a concerted effort in addressing the impact of COVID-19 on African economies. The call comes as the continent continues to battle with devastating financial losses. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy reports.
The COVID-19 pandemic caught Africa, like the rest of the world, unprepared. From struggling healthcare systems to lack of vaccines, the continent is yet to contain the virus.
Today, our senses are awoken, and a race to improve our health systems and manufacture locally is afoot. Africa is surviving the health pandemic, but our economies are stretched.
At the opening of the AU Ordinary Session of the Executive Council in Addis Ababa, delegates called for a collective response to the pandemic.
So as Africa CDC and the Africa Union, we are supporting our member states to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 on the economic and social sectors on this continent.
Despite positive strides to tackle COVID-19, the economic cost of managing the pandemic have remained high.
The lockdowns have meant that the economy of the country and the social system of the countries come to a total grind.
According to the AU, Africa's debt to GDP has risen from 40% in 2014 to at most 70% in 2022. Projected growth of 3.9% in 2022 is expected to do little to address the economic impacts of the pandemic. Africa has so far registered over 10.8 million positive cases with over 239,000 deaths. The African Union says that equity must be considered as a priority safety net to protect countries with few resources if the continent is to effectively contain the devastating impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Meanwhile, the African Union has called on member states to ratify the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement for its speedy implementation. The 40th Ordinary Session of the African Union Executive Council kicked off on Wednesday in Addis Ababa, Foreign ministers of member countries and senior officials of several organizations on the continent are participating in the opening address. The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, highlighted critical issues that need the attention of the AU and its member states. One of the key issues is the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Regional integration has in fact made progress, among others, the operationalization of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The operationalization of this AFCTA will also enable the free movement of persons in the continent. Pending the ratification of its adoption is slowing the process of entering into force. You can realize that we need to make more efforts.
The number of food insecure people on the continent increased. Africa is not on track to meeting the Sustainable Development Goal 2 target to end poverty and ensure access by all to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food.
Well, over in West Africa, traders in Ghana are calling on the government to step up efforts to stabilize the country's currency, and that's amid concerns over high inflation there. Inflation is running at 12.6%, and analysts predict that Ghana's cedi could yet fall further against the US dollar, adding to pressure on prices in the local economy. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafai reports from Accra.
Prince Oduola imports cars from the US and sells them in Accra. He says the cost of doing business has gone up due to the depreciation of the local currency, cedi, against the greenback.
The duty we paid is up at the current dollar rate every week. If the dollar goes up, the duty will be a bit increased.
In 2008, one cedi bought you $1. Now, you need 6 to buy that same dollar.
For us, we do margins because whatever rates it is, we pass on the value to our customers. But also, you need, for volumes of trade, you need a lot more cedis to be able to do the same volume of dollars. That means you need to augment more cash. You need to have a lot more cash reserve to be able to do the same $100,000 transaction.
Ghana's economy is steadily recovering from the pandemic, but the weakening currency is feeding through to inflation as the cost of goods and services shoots up.
The central bank says the high demand for forex by importers has contributed to the depreciation of the value of the cedi against the US dollar, coupled with investors pulling out large sums of money from the country due to Ghana's debt sustainability concerns.
The Ghanaian cedi depreciated against the US dollar by 4% at the end of last year. Analysts say the local currency is likely to depreciate further this year.
The cedi will depreciate in line with the fundamentals of the economy. High inflation as we have it, current account deficit, high budget deficit, all these things lead to some form of depreciation or demand for foreign currency and depreciation of the local currency. So as long as we continue to experience these macro fundamentals not around sustainable levels, we will see some form of depreciation in a flexible exchange rate regime.
The central bank says it will pump $450 million into the economy in the first quarter of this year to help stabilize the cedi. But some analysts believe it is unsustainable.
It can maybe halt the rate of inflation, right? But in the next 2-3 months, it may not be able to cover it. We now have about just 3 months of imports cover. And the amount of money that we're expecting to be pumped into the economy will probably just hold for a short period.
Prince Oduola fears the continuous depreciation of the cedi against the greenback will take a further toll on his business. He wants steps taken to stabilize the cedi to drive the economy to a more stable future. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Well, Egypt has begun building mining cities to extract gold, phosphate, and copper. Authorities say they've also loosened regulations to attract investors to the mining sector. CGTN's Yasser Akim has the latest on this from Cairo.
Mining has been neglected for decades in Egypt in favor of petroleum and gas. But a transformation is underway with plans to launch mining cities in the eastern and western deserts of the country.
We're talking now about the Golden Triangle, which goes from Kena, Safaga, Qusir, over an area of 9,200 square kilometers. It's a very rich area when it comes to minerals and resources. The plan is to, over 30 years, to invest about $19 billion to create 350,000 jobs for Egyptians. And it's not only going to be mining, it's also to extract the minerals and have the added value on these minerals.
Egypt has huge reserves of about 22 minerals, but they're mostly untapped resources. For instance, there's only one main gold mine and one gold refinery recently established.
Currently, Egypt, it's about 15 tons per year. Sukari mines is the main gold mine in Egypt. In 2020, extracted 452,000 ounces of gold. That's equivalent of about $1 billion. The lifetime of a Sukari field, it will last for 20 years. We have probably 12 million ounces still remain to be extracted. The estimated reserve of gold in Egypt is about 300 tons, and attracting more companies to come and explore for the gold, definitely this number will change.
Bureaucracy and an outdated law from 1956 have kept businesses away. But Tamer Abu Bakr, a veteran of the energy and mining industry, believes the government is now on the right track.
احنا عدلنا القانون ده بالتعاون مع الجهات الحكومية.
A new law was drafted in 2014 but was full of loopholes, so didn't get approval except in 2020 after some good amendments. The main problem in mining, especially gold, is the type of contract offered to investors. Worldwide, contracts include license fees, royalty fees, and taxes. Our contracts, however, were oil and gas type of partnership deals which were not attractive for investors. Therefore, we changed contracts to be the same as the rest of the world.
As a result of a healthier business environment, 25 agreements were signed with 11 companies for gold extraction, in addition to new licenses for other minerals such as phosphate, copper, and zinc.
These minerals are vital for the economy, not as a raw material but an added value. When you do some processing on the mineral, its value will jump from $100 per cubic meter to $1,000 per cubic meter, and with more industrial processing, it will reach $4,000. Adding value and industrialization of these materials will raise revenue to support economic development that we badly need.
The target set by the government is for mining sector to hit 5% of GDP, up from the current 0.8% in 15 years' time. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's leave our continent's borders and go over to the United States, where America's national debt has reached an all-time high of over $30 trillion. Well, that's triggered concerns about the country's future economic health. The debt levels are inching close to the federal government's debt ceiling, which was raised to $31.4 trillion last December by the U.S. Congress. Debt has risen due to massive government spending to fight COVID-19. Former U.S. President Donald Trump's large tax cuts are also contributing to the added debt stock. The U.S. Congressional Budget Office was warned that higher debt levels could trigger a fiscal crisis and lead to higher inflation. Well, let's leave it there for now. I'll be back for Global Business at the top of the hour, and here's what's coming up. An oil production and storage vessel has exploded off the coast of Nigeria, though it was not yet clear if there were any casualties or how much crude might have spilled into the sea. Investigations are underway to establish the cause of the explosion, while attempts are being made to contain the situation with help from local communities. We'll be live in Lagos to get the latest on the blast and much more at the top of the hour. But for now, let's take a short break. Beatrice will be back with more news from around the world.
With some of the highest natural sanctions in the world, Namibia is a mecca for scent borders. Being extreme personalities, the search to conquer the most difficult ride never ends. Rarely do you find one who's also passionate and caring about his community. His township tours connect two worlds and empower the local people. His other love, football, keeps the kids off the street and provides them with an opportunity to better their lives further down the road. This is Raymond, enriching his community one step at a time.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
And here's some more news for you now. In South Africa, a young dancer is inspiring others with every dance move. After losing his leg at 13 years old to osteosarcoma, a type of bone cancer, Musa Motha decided to approach life differently, more positively. Now at 26, Musa is twirling across stages around the world, using his disability as an ability to inspire audiences everywhere he goes. He's changing perceptions about differently abled bodies and showing that anything is possible. Here's Julie Shire.
Dance is so important to me because now I can finally, say that I found my purpose. My name is Musa Okomota, all the way from South Africa in Zone 14, Sebokeng. I'm a dancer, an amputee dancer, and I'm a cancer survivor. In my 11 years old, I got diagnosed with cancer. It's a bone cancer that is found in the bone marrow. It was found on my left knee, which initially was just below the knee. I was a soccer player, and after that, I couldn't play soccer anymore. I attended hospitals. When the doctor told me that, I have cancer and I have to start with my treatment, I actually didn't feel depressed or any sad moments because I was so ill for a long time. I was sick for a long time. So it was kind of a joyful moment where I finally now know what's wrong with me. The feeling when I'm dancing. Dance is my escape plan, it's my escape place, it's my escape process. With contemporary dance, I think it's actually, helping other people who are differently able that, you can also do it. Nothing will ever stop you because we are the same. So meaning we can do it together. It's very important to me to actually, not stop dancing because, again, I take it as like I'm healing people through dance. I'm actually sending the I am possible message through dance. What drives me is actually seeing people being inspired by myself. My dream is actually to change their mindset and shift their focus and show them that, instead of focusing on negative stuff, here's a way of doing things and you can also do it. If I can do it, you can also do it. I grew up in a disadvantaged township, but I didn't choose to stay in a corner and smoke drugs or feel sorry for myself. But instead, I chose to actually go outside there, look at people that inspire me, have goals, have dreams. It's all about the choices that we make. And now everything goes so smoothly because now I can preach whatever that I want to preach through dance. I can express my feelings, I can express all my emotions at the same time, at the same place. Convert that one thing into a million positive things. So it's all about the choice that you make.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Egypt and host Cameroon gear up for a mouth-watering semi-final clash at the Africa Cup of Nations. Let's begin with the Africa Cup of Nations, where hosts Cameroon